We're giving broad perspective and a different one. Thank you. So it's open now to everybody else to contribute, to question, to comment. Is there anybody? We've still got people online.
Yeah, we've got Graham Clayton.
Graham. Can you hear us? Great. We can't hear you.
It's all right. It's just unmuting. Is that okay now?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. John, I've got 1 or 2 questions for you, and thank you first for that. I found what you had to say fascinating. Who do the validators work for? Is the first question. Are the validation reports published? How widely available are they? And who then is responsible for securing rectification of problems that have been identified?
Sorry, Graham, but validation, were we talking about, which validators are we talking about? Sorry.
The validators of the self-evaluations. You described how there are validators.
Oh, what you mean in
evaluations?
Yeah.
Self-evaluations have been conducted properly. You talked about the validators then taking some responsibility to ensure that they have been conducted properly. So who are they working for?
Well, it varies according to country, but it's either an independent body or it is the government itself. But actually, I left out the ball point, and I'm glad you raised it, Graham, actually. I was conscious that I was probably talking too long. There has to be a paradigm shift. And actually, Carl said, should we have revolution, not reform? There has to be a paradigm shift in what is important. And the whole point I wanted to make by focusing on teaching is successful countries focus on teacher policies, and countries which focus on punitive external accountability systems tend to actually lower their performance. And I have to say, a classic example is the UK. The UK is around 11th in PISA. It could be much higher, actually. That's the thing about it. The capacity of schools is not, and the innovatory capacity of schools is not encouraged. The collective self-efficacy of schools is not encouraged. And neither is, as everyone said this morning, neither is collaboration at a professional level cross schools encouraged either. There is enormous untapped capacity. So your question about who are the validators are they neutral or not, is probably a good one, actually, Graham. But the point is, it shouldn't matter that much who the validator is. What should matter is the focus of the education system on raising the collective self-efficacy of schools and teachers, so that any points or criticisms that are made are about learning, not about accountability and potential for career destruction. That's what it should be about, anyway. And certainly is about in the 4 countries I cited, actually. There isn't that kind of approach. Anyway.
Thank you very much, John. Anybody else in this room wanting to comment or question? John.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to put myself on film. I won't. My comment would be that one of the issues I think is that we are all experts on education because we all had one. And so, the likes of, say, Gove can decide that the education he had was a good education, and therefore that's the education that everybody else needed. Whereas, obviously, what you've been talking about, evidence, and for some reason, education is an area in which governments can ignore evidence. And almost every teacher knows how teaching and learning could be improved, and yet almost every teacher finds themselves stuck in the rut of the system as it stands and unable to make the changes they know and believe would make things better. Just really the question is there any way of shifting so that we implement the things we know work as opposed to the things that the prejudices of politicians?
That's a very interesting question. I'm really glad you answered it. When Gove became Secretary of State in 2010, he said he was the most international of all Secretaries of State. And it drove me mad. And I remember he pulled Michael Barber and Andrew Schleicher together in press conference. I don't know if you remember that, Peter. I mean, it was amazing. You know, here are the two people who know about education more than anyone else in the world, you know, that sort of thing. And he used that to elevate his own profile as being evidence-based in terms of the reforms he wanted to make. And he cherry-picked and distorted the evidence from the OECD mercilessly, including a complete misreading of what the OECD were arguing about evolution in terms of responsibility. He saw that as a structural reform, building on, you know, Adonis's proposals for cannabis and massively expanding that. That's not what the OECD said. I was so angry about it, I went to see Andy Burnham when he was Shadow Secretary of State. He had no interest whatsoever in looking at the and I have to say, the Labour Party, if there's an Achilles heel with the Labour Party when it comes to education, they don't actually look or place a high priority on learning from other countries. Actually, they don't do it. And it drives me up the wall, actually. I may not have answered the question, but I think it was really, have I missed something, John? Because I can come back.
Yeah, how do we know from the evidence how things can be improved, how education can be improved, and yet we are stuck with the petty prejudices of politicians of all flavours.
Yeah, well, actually, funny enough, this is where there's some real potential here. I think Kevin being Bridget Phillipson's key advisor is really important, actually. And I think that Kevin Collins, and because he was actually in charge under Michael of the strategies, the literacy strategy, he was in charge of the numeracy strategy, but he understood that totally. And he understands teacher policy better than anyone else. And the fact that actually she's been fairly short-footed in some of her new initiatives, actually, in terms of reinventing Sure Start, getting that going again, support for working class kids, etc., shows that actually she's pointing in the right direction. But I do think, CASE and all other organisations should be focusing on saying, why aren't you learning from other countries? Why aren't you actually making it a top priority, etc., etc.? And I really, really do feel that very, very strongly. And the CASE is in a powerful position to be able to press Phillipson to actually have a dialogue and put together a seminar with the OECD on and I'd say, do it with the OECD. You haven't done it. I mean, what's coming out, and a really good opportunity is going to happen next week, actually. And I'll send the link to John, and maybe he can punt it round to you. But the Teaching and Learning International Survey is going to be published on the 7th next week. It's going to be launched in Singapore. Now, for me, it's died and gone to heaven stuff, actually, the teaching and learning. I've always thought TALIS was where it's at, actually. It should have been part of PISA, but the Americans under Bush actually stepped in and refused to have teachers' voices in PISA. And that's why Schleicher invented TALIS. It's a really important study. It is the only international study on teacher professionalism, self-efficacy, the whole lot. TALIS has always been where it's at. And I think CASE looking at TALIS and saying, let's seriously talk about international lessons on teacher policy with you, it's a really good thing to do. So I think it's about linking up with Phillips and saying, let's have a policy conversation about this,
Yeah.
And let's involve Andrea Schleicher, but not Michael Barber.
No, yeah. Look, he appointed me. I have a problem there, actually. And he did it against all sorts of shit happening.
John, are you trying to follow on?
No, I just wanted to. There's a comment in the chat from Graham Clayton, who says, "My problem, John, with your adoption of the concept of standards and structures being distinct concerns is that surely structures provide the means by which standards are considered and improved. Are not the rules which you describe for the conduct of self-evaluation matters of structure?"
It's a process, actually, self-evaluation. It's about trusting teachers. Look, I tell you what I think about schools. I think they're the last moral centres left in the country. The last moral centres. Teachers are expected to say what is right or wrong every second of the day.
Yeah.
Not the churches, no one else, actually. And there's so much, so the way parents view their kids is so different that there is a common core there. And that means that teachers have to be absolutely at the centre. And self-evaluation in that sense is a continuing process, not a structure you have to follow. And I'll give you an example, actually. And Bell found this, David Bell found this, actually. He was very pro self-evaluation. He included a huge self-evaluation section in the inspection framework, but it failed because it was attached to what was a high-stakes system. And there's another example in Hong Kong. John Macbeth, that they tried to introduce self-evaluation there as a mechanism, but it was high stakes. So the teachers rebelled because it was another damn thing to do that someone else was telling them to do. The point about self-evaluation is linked to school improvement, and teachers have control of it, and it's essentially flexible. But having a coherent vision about what your school ought to be from the self-evaluation process is really, really important, actually.
Thank you very much. We've got 3 people here. Yes.
I think really interesting. We've been to Flanders and Canada and Scandinavia, having a look at their systems and how we moved from a system of high stakes accountability to driven behaviours in our schools. And our inspector has gone into schools, and you can look at their annual report for the last 10 years, and I think they're correctly saying that self-evaluation is poor in our schools. But one of the objectives of, or one of the priorities for government is the whole system to develop a shared understanding of progression. And I think that sounds really simple, and you have to challenge a lot of assumptions because we all think we know what progression means. But if you have a purpose-driven curriculum that has a set of values, and you have a discussion as a whole system about what we mean by progression, so it's not just knowledge, understanding, but also values and attitude. If that's what you value as a nation, that's what you can evaluate against. And then how do you do that, and how does teaching need to evolve? So I think you've got a revolutionary policy that requires teaching to evolve from a system that was about delivering content to children.
No, I agree with that.
To a process of human development. That's a very, very different approach to teaching and learning. And it's going to take time for a profession to move from one system to another.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree, actually. I mean, I've always thought there was massive potential. I mean, I thought Jane Davidson was great, actually. I thought she was really, really good. There was always that massive potential. And, you know, Scotland's had its trouble and times. It had its problem. It's actually in Scotland, its local authorities, actually, that's a real problem. And there's not a systemic approach now. I think that there's an enormous responsibility on the profession through its own organisations. And someone said this earlier, I can't remember who it was actually, the role for the unions, you know, I think it was Kenny actually. I always thought when I was head of NUT that actually unions underfired when it came to and what we wanted was to go over the top on fighting for the profession, but providing an essential forum for teachers to do exactly what you say about how you discuss. Because as I said, they are the fount of all values, schools, you know, and that's where the debate ought to be. And unions ought to be providing that forum. And that means not just the NEU or NSCWT, but the teacher unions as well, actually. I always think that actually, I don't criticise unions for actually being too militant. I actually think they ought to draw far more on the collective power of their members' knowledge. It's my personal view.
Alan, I know you wanted to speak. I've got 3 others.
Two
Go ahead.
things. One is interesting about what John said about Estonia.
Because last year, the top 2 countries in the world on reading was Estonia and Ireland.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Now, how parties are not willing to take advantage of expertise to improve teaching and learning. Western Barton was the poorest local authority in Scotland and in the top poorest 4 in the whole of Europe. And a man called, was professor at Strathclyde, he designed a system, and he said, he went to Western Barton and he said 28% of the children left school at 11 with a reading age 1 year or worse than their chronological age, which meant they couldn't access the secondary curriculum. So he said to the chief education officer, I've got a scheme, but it's a 10-year scheme. And if you implement it, I will eliminate illiteracy. You will be the first local authority in the world to eliminate illiteracy. He says, a lot of people claim it, it's not true. It would be true. So we are going to need money. He said, I'll raise the money. So he then wrote to him and he said, I really use chief editor rang him. He said, well, my money. He said, I've got the money. So he meets the head teachers, and there are 32 schools, and he says, we're going to do a survey of phonics, and we're going to have a control group. And schools hate having control groups. So they agreed that half of them would do the thing, and the other half would be the control group. And it came absolutely clearly that synthetic and analytic phonics would absolutely change the standard. So they said, okay, we'll do it. So they then spent 9 years implemented year after year. What he did was he went and looked at every school teaching, and he plucked out the 25 best teachers of literacy, and he made them his central team. And every school had at least half a day. If you were in a posh part with 4% free school meals, and another part you had 60, 70% of free school meals, they got 3 or 4 days of an expert. And so it gets now to year 9. And the number coming out had been 3,000, had been 800. It was now 104. Got it down to 104 in 9 years. So he said, okay, we'll now do tour by tour. And he had teachers, solicitors, doctors, dentists, nurses, trained them to do half an hour every day for the next 7 months. And at the end of that, there were only 4 children that didn't have a reading age linked to the chronological age. So the Labour Party put it into its manifesto. It was the first time Labour lost the election. And they only lost by 1 seat. And there were 3 recounts, and they lost it by 60 votes. And the Scottish Nationalist Party refused to do it. They just gave the money in dribs and drabs to every local authority to improve literacy. And that was it. So it never changed. Scotland could have been the first country in the world.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 local authorities said, oh, well, we'll do 10 years. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. You have to do the whole package. And he's never been able to persuade anybody else in the world to do it.
Now, we're now running into coffee time. I'm going to ask John to wait until the end of this session and let the people who want to say something say it as quickly as they can. But I want to give you an opportunity to say what you wanted to say.
Thank you very much. And thank you. And it all makes perfect sense to me. But as a prerequisite to changing the narrative that currently accepts the punitive system evaluation we have, and as a prerequisite to enabling teachers to be involved in self-evaluation, we can't have this discussion without thinking seriously about initial teacher training, which is absolutely all over the place. And I think it's very weak. And we're lucky that we've got some people still in the system who were trained 30 years ago. But that is absolutely a fundamental part. That's all I'm going to say. It's just something else to throw in.
So thank you. Thank you. So
I'll just quickly ask a question if there was time for that, and that is, anecdotally, there seems to be a lot of evidence to suggest that the quality of teacher training and the amount of teacher training links directly into, well-functioning, high-performing systems. I know with our current system, you don't actually have to be a qualified teacher now to go into teaching. There's all sorts of apprenticeship schemes going on, which can be better or worse. What evidence do you feel and as hard evidence as you can find that there is a direct link, because you said it's teacher stupid, between the quality of teacher training and the quality of educational outcomes?
can I just ask Carl to contribute?
It's a completely different question, though. It's about, if I say schools council, do some of you remember this organisation, which was, unions, local authorities and the central government in combination?
And professors, there were 2 or 3 professors on it.
And they produced curriculum materials, had a role in assessment across the country. But it was this union, really, across teacher unions, national government and local authorities. You have to bung in now with multi-academy trust. But there was that consortium of organisations. Would it help to bring something like that back? But Thatcher got rid of it in '79.
Okay, John.
Well,
See if there's anybody online? No. Okay.
The instruction they brought on teacher training, it's highly fractured. It's all over the place. I totally agree. And in fact, actually, the correlational evidence is that high-performing countries have systemic, coherent teacher training systems, which actually don't stand on their own. They're simply the beginning of continuous professional learning throughout your career. And that is the evidence. It's correlation, but I don't discorrelation, actually. I mean, people say, oh, it's not causal, it's correlational. Actually, I think correlational is really, really important. You can't get away from the fact the highest performing systems actually focus on their learning needs, and they're only copying what industry does. So the best, most successful firms put a huge amount into professional development, constant updating all the bloody time, So I mean, it's not just something unique to. So I think a reform of the teacher training system and linking it in with a professional learning strategy, starting with high quality teacher training and a consistent approach and pulling it all together is really, really important. I think your point was really, really important because it's all over the place.
Well, it's been completely changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
In directions none of us should want. Do you want to say, is there anybody else who wants to contribute finally for this session? International examples? Over to John to finish.
Well, I thought.
Sorry.
Yes, this self-evaluation, does that mean that every member of staff evaluates their own work and will put it together, or what?
No, the process of school self-evaluation is linked to school development planning. It's everyone saying, look, where is the school going? What is our vision for the school? And I think, colleagues have said that very, very clearly. What do we want in relation to the community? What do we need as individuals to actually contribute to that? Are we getting the professional learning that we need? Are we getting the support we need? Let's have a look at not only the teaching support that we're getting, but are we getting sufficient support from support staff and parents? What do we need? It's a coherent approach. And I thought Graham was absolutely right to test me. It's not about the imposition of a self-evaluation structure. It is about having a process approach to internal learning all the time, and for schools to be encouraged to do that. And if there's any external evaluation, and that's why I'd say it's got to be part of a coherent systemic teacher policy, the external evaluation is about how well are you doing and what extra support do you need, not how we punish you. That's the important thing. That's the critical paradigm shift, actually. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, John. That has been fascinating. I think all of us could listen for a lot longer. And you're absolutely right. And completely infuriates me that no governments really look at other countries and what they're doing. Exactly. Even, as you said, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, which do have different education systems.
Yeah.
Many parts of which are much better than ours.
Yeah.
And at least in those three countries, the governments actually listen much better to the sector, if you like. Whereas this government, whichever government it is, does not want to listen to the people who are the experts. And I've never been able to understand that. And not only that, they're not prepared to look at other countries and see what they do, which is more successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either it's total arrogance on the part of people in this country who think we're all doing it right and it's all absolutely fine, when most of us know that it's not. I don't know how we resolve that.
It's a massively neglected resource, actually, all that international evidence.
I know.
It's absolutely right. Yeah.
I know. So thank you very much indeed, John.